Greetings! I'm Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to build a spaceship. A real one. Well, a model of a real one. This is the Horizon model's Mercury Spacecraft, famously not named after Freddie Mercury. I was kind of surprised to find out that this is an Australian company. Well, the company is here and the model was designed here, the plastic moulding was done in China, like everything else. I understand they closed sometime in 2025, which is unfortunate. Admittedly, I hadn't even heard of them previous to finding this kit, but it is kind of cool to see something interesting made in my home country. Anyway, this is a 72nd scale model, and you can actually build two Mercury spacecraft with this kit. The side of the box shows a picture of two different ways the kit can be built, though there are three or technically four. You'll also notice that the instructions are printed on the back of the box, which, well, it's fine. It does save a bit of paper, and they are adequate, though I do think a bit more detail might have been nice. Some things are just a little bit unclear, though I did obviously get the model finished. Both of them. Inside the box we find two plastic sprues. These are identical, so one sprue makes one Mercury spacecraft. The plastic is quite nice looking. There's very little in the way of mold lines, and everything's nice and crisp. Surprising probably everybody, I couldn't tell you how accurate the detailing is. If you think I don't know much about tanks, you should see how little I know about spacecraft. It does look good to me though, as I've said about 6 times already. There's not a whole lot of parts in the kit, even though there is enough to model it in 3 modes: launch, orbit, or re-entry. Something else you get is a boilerplate version. That's the corrugated, almost complete looking capsule part. I guess that doesn't really count as a mode, that was only used for testing, but I thought it was a pretty cool inclusion. There's also some photo etch. I know I usually complain about photo etch, and this time is no different. My main problem with this is that it seems harder than the usual photo etch, so it's a bit more difficult to bend. That may just be a Herbert problem though. Decals are also included, and I would assume there's enough here for 2 entire models. They look good and neat. I've not used them yet, so I can't speak of their quality and how they work as decals, but they do look good. It's time to start gluing bits of plastic together. I start by building the core of the capsule, I guess you might call it. These two parts go together nice and neat. The important bit is the top, so make sure that's as neat as you can get it. The fit is pretty good. On top of the core, that's what I've decided to call this, I add this, cap. You shouldn't have any trouble with this. I didn't. There is a couple of strips of photo etch that go on this part, but I didn't do that until later. Next, some drilling. The hole in the center of the heat shield is labeled as for launch and orbit modes only. The one on the edge is for the display stand. The drill bit I'm using is way too small, so I embiggen the hole with my knife. I test fit with the display stand until it fits. That is what test fitting is for. With the holes drilled, you can now glue the core to the heat shield. This should be pretty difficult to get wrong. Playing with it like a spinning top is optional, but certainly recommended. Next, the outer, hull. Sure, hull works. The 3 segments of the outer hull are glued on next. This isn't difficult, though I did have to apply a little pressure and do some minor kajiggering to get the parts to fit evenly, with no gaps or misaligned edges. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it does look quite good. Once again, playing with it like a top is not required, but why not? It works better with the hull installed. This is important for you to know. Now it's time for the retro pack. I didn't just know what that part is, the instructions call it a retro pack, so I'm calling it a retro pack. The instructions do also say to paint and decal this before installation, but I'm not going to. You can't tell me what to do. Isn't that the point of the instructions, Herbert? Yeah, sometimes. I'm not really sure why there's a hole in the heat shield underneath this. It does nothing. You still have to eyeball the position of the retro pack. That's not the worst thing, it's not overly difficult. Just seems a waste of several seconds in drilling the hole. Oh well, the part is installed in what looks to me to be the correct position. Next, I have to shave off a spot for some photo etch. The instructions say to remove the top half of 4 lines. It doesn't specify any in particular, so I chose a spot and sliced and scraped the area flat. Then I glue this little doover into place. This is the horizon sensor, or at least that's what the instructions say it is. They could be lying. Either way, I've superglued it into place. On top of the capsule, I glue another piece of photo etch. This one is, apparently, the destabilizing flap. I guess it's a flap for destabilizing? That bit is meant to be hanging off to the right side if you're looking at it with the photo etch circle I just glued on facing toward you. These two parts are only for the orbit and re-entry modes, so don't use them on the launch mode, or you'll go to jail. As far as photo etch goes, these two parts weren't too bad at all. Let's do some annoying photo etch. This, I don't know what you would call it. Is it supports? Or cables? I've no idea. I also didn't quite understand the instructions at first, and thought the little nubbins around the edge of the retro pack were supports for the photo etch. That's not the case. The photo etch goes next to the nubbins. I glue it into the center at first, and then I bend it so it conforms to the shape of the capsule. Bending this photo etch is a bit difficult. Not impossible. It's just a bit less flexible than the usual brass photo etch you'd get in a kit. Maybe this is made of steel or something. Here are some other bits while the lower section is bonding. These little doodads go over the join on the upper part of the capsule here. This was meant to be done before, but I didn't wanna. I then return my attention to the lower bit, which is glued to the sides of the capsule. The idea is the whatever it is should be straight between the edge of the capsule and the retro pack, with no bend. I pre-bent this, which means there's a little bit less tension in the part to pull it away from the glue, which obviously makes gluing it a bit easier. It does look kind of messy here, mostly because the black superglue I'm using is very visible. It's not really as bad as it looks, and you can, if you want, scrape away the excess bits of glue anyway. And that's it for this version of the Mercury Spacecraft. Let's build the display stand. This is pretty simple. You glue the support duva onto the base, making sure that it's nice and vertical, and then, most importantly, you glue the logo thing on here. I believe this is the same as the monument at Cape Canaveral. Obviously, the capsule is then mounted atop the support using the hole you didn't forget to drill into the heat shield. Obviously, I've built the orbit and/or re-entry mode here, but as I've probably already mentioned, we can build 2 Mercury spacecraft with this kit, so why not? I'm going to build the launch mode. I begin by gluing the 2 halves of this cylinder together. Pretty simple stuff. There's a little arrow, pointy thing, which goes in the top here. You can see how it's pushed the halves of the cylinder apart just a tiny bit. That's unacceptable, so I embiggen the mounting hole with my knife. Then it fit nicely. Then I make sure this little cone is going to fit through this ring. It does. So I glue the cone on top of the capsule. The capsule itself is obviously assembled in the same way as the one I've already shown, so if you need to see that again, just skip back in the video. Then, onto the bottom of the cylinder, I add this bit. The little tabs around the edge of this part need to align with the raised detail along the edge of the cylinder. There isn't a long raised bit for every tab to align with, but align what you can. While that's bonding, I slide the ring over the top of the capsule and glue it into place. There are holes in the ring, as you can see, and it looks as though those are to align with the tabs on the top of the capsule in a particular way, though the instructions don't actually mention this. Next, at the bottom of the launch escape system, that's what the cylinder is, I install 3 small engine nozzles. I think I may have installed these a little bit too close to the central thing there, whatever that is. You'll see the fitting problem I had in a moment. I then add the photo etch horizon sensor. This one has the cover on, and unlike the previous sensor, I didn't trim back the ribs on the capsule. I probably should have. I figured the sensor cover might sit a bit further out than the sensor itself. Either way, it's on. Here's the fiddly part. The support tower thing for the escape system. You probably can't tell, because I'm not showing it, but I had to enlarge the mounting holes for this very slightly. I figured it would be easier to do this slowly and in steps. I'm only gluing the bottom in place at first, and doing my best to make sure they're as neat and straight as I could get them. The photo etch did very slightly interfere with one of these parts, so I very gently trimmed a tiny bit of plastic off the back of it. You can see here, I've got just about everything glued together when I realised that the escape system wasn't going to fit atop its tower. The engines interfere with the top bits of bracing. My solution was to cut away the bracing. I'm sure the Mercury spacecraft rivet counters are now furiously hammering away at their keyboards. Settle down. I figured I could just glue some replacement bracing in there later, though clearly I haven't done that yet. Other than that, it's very easy to get the escape system onto the tower. There is also some photo etch to represent the cables at the bottom of the tower, or I assume they're cables, but surprisingly, I didn't feel like putting that on, so I didn't. I also haven't added the photo etch to the rest of the capsule either. I mostly built this version just to show how it goes together, so if I ever paint this, I will bite the bullet and do the photo etch, or find an alternative, maybe 3D printed. But for now, that's it. The 72nd scale Mercury spacecraft, both launch and orbit mode from Horizon models, is now complete. Mostly complete. As I just said, some of the photo etch was omitted, and that is pretty much the only thing I didn't really like about this kit. I mean, I never really like photo etch, but this particular photo etch is a bit harder and less flexible than most other photo etch, which makes it more annoying to work with. I'm sure if you're a photo etch enjoyer, it's not too bad, and in fairness, I can think of worse things. I can also think of better things though. Anyway, other than that, it's a really nice little kit of an interesting subject. I'm not a Mercury spacecraft surgeon, so I couldn't tell you if there are any glaring errors in the model, but it really looks the part to me. You can actually mount the models on the display stands in a couple of ways. You always use that mounting hole, unless you want to drill another. What I mean though, is you can rotate it around on that point. I kind of like having it reversed from what the box would suggest, so the capsule sits a bit more vertical. You could do whatever you like though, really. I do actually remember seeing a Mercury capsule at the museum not all that long ago as part of a travelling space exhibit. I'm sure it was a replica and not the real thing, but it was still really cool to see, and terrifyingly small. I guess that explains why the model is so tiny. Anyway, let's not get too waffly. It's a nice model, and I also quite like that you get two entire kits with it. That's really good for those of us who are just a little bit indecisive on which version to build. It's not an especially difficult kit, and other than the photo etch, I found it quite enjoyable. I should certainly build more historical spacecraft. If anyone has any good suggestions for kits that fit that description, let me know in the comments below. If you'd like to watch me build kits like this one live, I stream modelling a couple of times a week. There's a link in the description, so come hang out. Subscribe here if you want to see more of this kind of thing. Share the video with anybody you think might find it helpful. And if you really like what I do, and you want to see videos a bit early, consider supporting on Patreon. Links are in the description. Take care of yourselves, be excellent to each other, and thanks for watching. Farewell.